Mississippi. Dave Hughes here, and there, in this case, there being Washington, D.C., we have Gerard Gibert joining us again before he heads back to the great state of Mississippi. Gerard, how you doing? Did you get any sleep last night? Yep, did we lose him again?
Hey, Dave.
There he is.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I had you muted, and I forgot to turn it off. But we got a little bit, so quite the ordeal as we attempted to attend the ball, but it was brutally cold and about a 2.5-hour wait in line, moving very slowly to get to the security point to get in the actual venue itself, the convention center. So I'm sorry to admit we ended up bailing, but I think that was after an hour and a half. Man, you can't imagine just the ordeal and the chaos, and the poor ladies in their formal wear with their open-toed shoes, many of whom were noticing that their feet were turning red, and the service members in just their dress blues, of course, with no overcoats. They were absolutely in major pain. So I'm sorry to admit we bailed, and we had to walk several blocks to get to outside of the secure perimeter. This is all a function of security. And in talking to a friend with us that was here for the last inauguration, the last Trump inauguration, as you can imagine, the security is heightened considerably, and so they've expanded the perimeter around these venues to the point where there's no vehicles that can enter, and they have parked Humvees in the streets to avoid passage. I think I discussed that yesterday, but same thing with this ball venue. So we didn't make it, but we also were a little concerned about getting back in time to get a little bit of sleep because our Congressman Michael Guest was kind enough to meet with us at 7 a.m. this morning and give us a personal guided tour of the U.S. Capitol. I'm actually, Dave, sitting at his desk right now. He's conducting business, and he was gracious enough to allow us to hang out here. I've actually got a meeting this afternoon that I think I told you about that Joel, and Natasha set up with Senator Marsha Blackburn. So we're kind of hanging out here in Congressman Michael Guest's office in the Cannon building across the street. But he gave us a tour. Dave, we were worried about not getting back to the hotel before a reasonable time of before 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and then having to get up and head to downtown again. Turns out most people did get back about 2 o'clock in the morning that ended up attending. So that's why we bailed. The congressman gave us a great tour, and it's just fascinating going through the nation's capital facility and learn a lot of history that, honestly, I did not know. I think the average American may not know unless they've ever had a tour. But the congressman was well aware of all that information, and he was very gracious and just explaining a lot of the history. And, you know, Dave, when you walk through here in the U.S. Capitol, you can't help but feel a range of emotions of just awe and might and power and you know, but more importantly, gratitude to the people who framed our country, who had the vision to create it and to draft its founding documents. And of course, there's lots of recognition of them. But then you think about all those who sacrificed to protect our freedoms, to ensure and preserve this facility. And there's a giant plaque in one of the halls that I was not aware of, and that recognizes those who died on the aircraft on 9/11, as you recall, that was headed for the Capitol. And it rightfully recognizes those individuals who sacrificed. And the Congressman Guest pointed out, you know, if it weren't for these people, we might not be in this building. It may not look the same, you know, if it had been rebuilt since then. And it just makes you think about all the history behind this great nation. But and big day.
I think you're exactly right. We gloss over that sometimes. We just don't pay it any attention because it's there and it's always been there. But when you stop and really consider it, like you're getting the chance to do, I can imagine it hits you pretty hard.
It does. And again, there's just so much history captured in the halls and on the walls and in the rotunda. And, thinking about that swearing in just happening yesterday, and the platform's still there, by the way. And we spent some time in there. There's so much history, and there's so many details and almost hidden details and nuances about the art. Even on, the top window in the center of the rotunda, I never knew there's actually a figure painted in of George Washington in the center, and he's surrounded by 13 angels. And I didn't know that existed. And the congressman, of course, was pointing all that out. And we also went into a building that was the original House of Representatives. And I didn't think about the fact that we actually had presidents who left the presidency and then became members of the House, and that we went through an era where most of our presidents came from the House. Now we think about them coming from the Senate, but for a long time our senators were appointed; they weren't elected. Nobody knew who the senators were the way they do today. So just the evolution of history, so enjoyable. And of course, the big inauguration yesterday. I know you guys have been talking about the president putting pen to paper on just a series of orders, and we've been analyzing those all morning, trying to wrap our head around all that. I know you guys have been doing that too, as has all the media. Incredible.
Well, it's almost impossible to keep up with. I ran down the totals just a few minutes ago, and I think counting personnel actions and executive orders, it's over 300 that he did yesterday alone, with more coming today. We've never seen anything like this, Gerard, ever.
Right. Yeah, and while I think you and I would probably agree, and our audience, with most of the actions, it does concern me. I have to be honest a little bit, just be objective here, that we don't want to turn our government into a government of one. And unfortunately, we've gotten to the point where, as you've seen from the last few cycles, presidents are just trading executive orders. This is what I want to do, and then somebody gets elected in place of that person. They reverse all that, and they implement what they want to do. And I'm thinking, what about these other 535 people we send up here to work in the House and the Senate? So it's a little cause for concern, though some of the stuff, it's certainly administratively, like a hiring freeze on government workers. Well, I don't think we need Congress involved in that. That makes sense. And of course, ridding our government of DEI and its hiring practices and reinstating merit. Yeah, that makes total sense. Not subjecting our fine warriors to all this social experiment. I think the president referred to it as a political experiment. Well, I totally agree with that. We don't need Congress for that. There's some other things, though. I just feel like the Congress needs to be involved. But the agenda is packed, a lot to do. I got to share this with you guys real quick, and I know we're running out of time. We went to breakfast close to the Capitol, a place that the Congressman recommended after our tour, and I walk in, Dave, and it's no more than Congressman Ro Khanna from the Silicon Valley, and he's meeting with, turned out to be a couple of supporters, our constituents. So on his way out, this is a really small place, had about 6 tables in it. I stood up and introduced myself. And, I told him we had been with Congressman Guest, of course, and we kind of explained my connection to the IT world. He represents Silicon Valley and about our big IT projects, technology projects happening in Mississippi. And so we exchanged contact information, and he shared with me that after I asked him, he's willing to come on the show and talk to us. So that'd be great to get a perspective, from a more reasonable, moderate Democrat that represents the Silicon Valley to offer his perspective to our Mississippi audience. That's just pretty cool. You never know what you're going to run into when you're in this town, of course.
Well, and you're doing the good work there, because I think in the Trump administration, that big glow from yesterday will quickly fade. We have got to get back to everybody talking from both sides, just like what you're talking about there, so we can get some things done. So good job on that.
Yeah, and before we go, one thing he said was, I said, Congressman, just kind of tongue-in-cheek laughing, you and I probably don't agree on everything, but I catch you on the news, especially the business news, all the time. And he's just, I said, so you may not want to come on. No, I'd love to come on. I said, well, he said, Gerard, we got to get back to recognizing that our adversary is China, not each other. And that, I thought that was wise on his part. So it's been a lot of fun. We're headed back today, and it's just been a great couple of days. Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it, Gerard. Gerard Gibert headed back to Mississippi. When we come back in the Element Wealth studios, Christopher Green, professor at Ole Miss, joins